because I wasn't in the great heavenly conference room in the pocket universe where apparently we all choose our life paths. Like, I don't know.
Wow.
I know you don't say that to someone, like, because that's not helpful. And so here's sort of where I've landed on that, because I've had people say, I'm clearing my karma. I was an abuser. This is how I'm working. I should thank my abuser because they volunteered to be that person in my
Oh.
life, like all of it.
Hey everyone, I hope everyone is doing good and taking good care of themselves. So, today's episode is one I have been deeply looking forward to because we are joined by someone whose work has genuinely shifted how we understand trauma and emotional paralysis. And, our guest is none other than Britt Frank, who's a licensed neuropsychotherapist, educator, and the author of the best selling books like The Science of Stuck and Align Your Mind. Her work bridges neuroscience, psychology, and practical tools that help people move from survival mode to growth and prosperity. We are diving into the neuroscience of stuckness in trauma recovery and exploring why survivors often can't move forward, and even when they are doing everything right. So, we are going to talk about that. We are going to unpack that. So, without any delay, let me welcome our guest. Britt, thank you so much for joining in today.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me on. I've been looking forward to this.
Yes, it's an honor to have you, Britt. We were trying in the past, but I mean, you must be having a busy schedule, but thank you so much once again. We've got a lot of talking to do today.
Yes.
So, Britt, for me, my childhood experience and the confusion around neglect and trauma, in a way, pulled me into this kind of a work, this domain, understanding psychology, our brain, trauma. And, I really wanted to understand, because of all that experience, I wanted to understand why the human psyche holds on to pain. I really wanted to understand because it was really difficult and painful to release that and move past that. I am curious what personal and professional experience led you to explore the neuroscience of stuckness and dedicate your entire work, when it comes to helping people to move forward again.
Mm. And I think there are really, I mean, this is probably reductive, but I do think there's, generally speaking, two types of people who end up doing the work that we do. One, their lives are perfect and everything is so easy and they just want to help people, and that's lovely. And then there are the other people who have a whole bunch of pain and suffering and trauma and confusion, and somehow, in finding our way to the work, we tend to fall in love with the work. I didn't set out right after college to be a psychotherapist. I worked in the corporate world, and the work
Wow.
found me, and my life changed so much. I became kind of insufferable about, all I want to do is talk about the brain now. And so why not just do that? So when I was 31, I actually went back to school for my master's and did one of
Wow.
those fun midlife crisis pivot things. And here we are.
Wow, amazing. I personally feel, there's something about people like us. I mean, I am a late bloomer. I feel like I started my studies again, at the age of 35. I started, as a hairstylist because it was just for my survival. I had to somehow survive, make money, pay for food and everything. And only when I got my husband, he helped me channelize, everything into one direction. He said, don't waste your time. Stop doing all these substance and crap. Get over with it and go back to school. You have a lot to offer. And that was like, a kind of a eureka moment for me. I was like, okay, let me try. And trust me, I was into a lot of substance. I don't demonize, addiction, but I was able to channelize that addiction into a good direction, if that makes sense. I know people might be like, what the hell? Drugs, addiction, they can never, take you to anywhere good. They are going to, just spoil you and, destroy you eventually. I get that. But with me, I don't know, maybe it's my ADHD brain, or maybe, me being a little autistic on the spectrum. Addiction did act as a catalyst, for me to channel my entire focus and energy. I would want to know, Britt, have you come across such folks, or I am some kind of an alien? I mean, exceptional, or, the odd one out?
Well, if you're an alien, then you and I are from the same home planet because you
Wow.
and me, and I think most people I know who have overcome addiction, including myself,
Oh, wow.
I wouldn't recommend addiction as catalyst, like, that wouldn't have been my choice. I would never
True.
say to a client, "So, you know what I think you're missing in life is, like, a really, really deadly heroin addiction, and just go do that, and then you'll catalyze your life." However, so I wouldn't recommend it. However,
Mhm.
I do think that addiction is so chaotic, and for me, so life and death, that the alchemy was sort of just a byproduct of recovery. It had gone so far down the drain that there was nothing left to do except die or do some really serious transformational types of things. And I wouldn't want to repeat my addictions. And there were multiple drugs, people, behaviors that, look, you can be addicted to just about anything. And so I always say pills and people and places and things. Yes. Um, but I don't regret it, and I am, again, grateful for it, not in a everything happens for a reason, spiritual bypassy way, but grateful for it in that those parts of me that were addicted to substances found a way to keep me going when otherwise I might not have been able to. So addiction is preferable to not being alive, and so temporarily it was not good, but useful. And that's really important differentiation, right? It wasn't good, but it was useful. And that's why I don't regret it. Wouldn't repeat it, wouldn't recommend it, but it was all used. And now I can sit here with you and say, hello, fellow planet addictionism person who is grateful for the catalyst of their addiction, because I am too.
And the best thing, Britt, was that I was addicted. I was studying. I was channeling all my attention and focus on my studies. And one fine day, in that state of being, dosed with all that substance, a part of me is coming forward and telling me, "Sweetie, I think you should be done. Let's, try something else. Let's move on to something else." And that was the day when I just, reached out to my husband and I said, "I think I will be stopping this." And he was like, "Wow, this is the best gift that you're giving it to me." And I mean, how do I unpack that? I personally feel addiction helped me, of course, numb whatever was unresolved since childhood. But in a way, it did activate. Now, I'm not trying to advocate that it activates a certain faculty inside of you. Definitely not. It might not be the case. But somewhere or the other, I felt it activated a higher self inside of me that communicated back that, "Sweetie, it's time to get off." And I was addicted for 10 years. And one day, that thought, that, vision in my head, and I was done. From next day onwards, I was just clean. And I was channeling all my energy into my study, my YouTube channel, pet, plant, cooking, learning, and improving myself.
Mm.
So I would want to know, I mean, as a neuro psychotherapist, I would want to know, Britt, what actually, this addiction does to us and how can it, help us, somehow survive, cope, and manage? And does addiction also alter the brain on the long run? And is, the condition of the brain irreparable when it is under addiction? I mean, what are your thoughts if you could shine some light?
So my disclaimer is I'm not a medical practitioner. I'm not a physician. So the neurological long-term implications of different drugs, I can't speak to. I can say I did a lot of speed and I smoked a lot of meth and I did a lot of cocaine and I did a lot of opiates. And did
Mhm.
I fry my brain long term? I hope not. Maybe. Maybe things are harder for me now that may not have been had I not done that. But what we do know about the brain is that assuming that you have not structurally damaged what's happening in the hardware, that our brain can grow and it can build new pathways and new things can be created and learned. Addiction is like a 5-lane highway that your brain has learned, if I do this, I can avoid that. So let's build a 5-lane superhighway. Not doing the drugs, not doing the behaviors is sort of like a little dirt road that leads somewhere else. I still probably have that 5-lane superhighway in my brain, but now I
Wow.
have an alternative. Now I
Mhm.
my dirt road is probably more like a 2-lane country highway right now. So I've got my freeway and I've got my little paved 2-lane recovery highway. And that's what's most important to me. Again, assuming that you have not damaged your brain to a point where now a medical intervention is necessary. Our brains can learn and grow, and any patterns that have been conditioned by family, by society, they may always be there, but I don't have to go down that road just because it's there. It's like driving. I don't enjoy taking the highway at night. And so even though it might take longer, I can do the back roads and that's fine. But knowing that addiction doesn't mean that forever you have to go down that superhighway. It's there if you
Mm,
choose. And I'll tell you a story because this just happened last
mm,
week. I have
mhm.
not had to, I've built my life where I am not around drugs. I am not around people who use drugs. It's just not a thing.
Wow.
And
Mhm.
for the first time in many, many years, I was actually offered opiates, pills by a physician
Oh.
for a good reason.
Mhm.
I had an
Mhm.
injury and the doctor was like, "Oh, would you like me to prescribe you, some hydrocodone for the pain?" I
Mm.
immediately felt all the green lights on that 5-lane superhighway go, "Yep, come on down. Here we go. Let's." And it took me a minute. And I said, "No, thanks. I'm good with
Wow.
Tylenol and Advil." But I could feel that highway beckoning. And so I take addiction recovery seriously. I don't struggle with it every day, but I respect that it's there and I'm grateful that there are enough parts of me that prefer this other road that we had a moment of, "Oh, maybe," and then no, 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 no. Life is actually better without that. So let's go that way. But as far as
Mhm.
long-term structural damage, I think it's safe to say, depending on what drugs you're doing and the amounts that you're doing, yes, of course, we can completely wreck our neurology in irreparable ways. And I'm grateful that I still seem to have a few neurons floating around that do their jobs well.
Mhm. That's great. Britt, we often hear people say, I'm feeling so stuck.
Mm.
I just can't move past, I can't move on. But that word means so many different things if we closely analyze. I would want to know from your neuropsychotherapeutic lens, how do you define, this entire phenomena of being stuck? I'm just there. And how is it different? If you could simplify things for us, how is it different from procrastination or lack of motivation, Brit?
Mm, I love that question. And you're so right. There are so many different types of stuck. And I
Yeah.
make it very clear in my book and in my work that when you're stuck because of oppression, because of active abuse, because of any systemic thing that you have no control over, because of a natural disaster, if a tornado ravaged your city and now you're stuck living with 20 people in a shelter, that's not the stuckness I'm talking about. That's the type of stuck that is literal stuckness. A thing happened that you have zero choices about, and now you are in fact stuck. So that's one kind of stuck. And I could argue that's the real definition of stuckness because you have no choices. The other type of stuckness is where my work focuses. The
Mhm.
other type of stuckness is the kind where there's no logical reason why you can't have the thing, do the thing, be the thing. You're not living under oppression. There's no active threats. You have a few choices. Sometimes what we mean when we say I'm stuck is not the kind of stuckness of I have no choices. Often I'm stuck means I don't like my choices. And of the choices available to me, I don't want to do any of them. And that's the stuckness that I specialize in. I kind of could do, we'll use working out just because that's something that most people can relate to. There's no reason I feel so stuck with my fitness goals. Okay, well, are you stuck? because there's no logical reason that you can't do it. You don't have any mobility issues. There are no financial barriers to taking a walk. You could do the thing. And the academic world calls this the intention action gap, meaning there's no logical reason why I'm not doing the thing. I want to do the thing, but I'm not doing the thing. And we call that stuckness. And my work focuses on it's not a lack of motivation and it's not a lack of willpower and it's not even a personal or a moral failing. It's that when it comes to procrastination and this type of stuckness, human brains are not designed for health and happiness. Human brains are designed for energy conservation, pattern recognition, and doing as little as possible to stay alive. So that's not an excuse. We can override that and reprogram. But if you don't know that your brain's primary goal is preserve life, not enhance health, you're going to stay stuck.
Wow, fair enough. Britt, you often say that our brain is not trying to sabotage us. It's trying to protect us. Now, here's the twist. If I would have come across that, 10 years back, I would be, considering that statement as very gaslighty. And no, I don't want to hear more about it. This is really hurting my ears and my brain. But now I find that statement, to be really profound with a lot of deeper context and meaning. Could you explain how trauma, you know, can cause the brain to confuse, safety with danger, and how it keeps survivors, how do I put it? Locked in that state, in that, pattern of paralysis and fear? If you could, unpack that.
Sure. And it's kind of like with couples therapy. If you and your partner, let's say you're deeply in love, you want to be together, and you just are not communicating well, and you go to a couples therapist. The couples therapist is not going to say, "All right, it's you against you, and now we've got to fight it out." No. A skillful couples therapist will say, "Okay, you two, the problem is not the two of you. We have a problem, but we need to have the two of you partner against the problem, whether it's a financial stressor or your kids are out of control or whatever. It's not me versus you, it's us versus the problem." And when I say that your brain is not out to get you, it's kind of like having couples therapy with your own brain. It's you and your brain are not in opposition to each other. Even when it seems like your brain is this horrible, evil thing that is out to wreck your goals and ruin your life, and your inner critic is yelling at you, and everything in your head is noisy, you and your brain are on the same team, which is good news because it's not like you can get a new one. The brain you have is the one you have. So we have to learn to work with each other in order to solve the problem. So trauma will make all kinds of things happen that make it feel like your brain is evil and out to get you. Trauma will cause you to internalize abuse. I am bad. I am worthless. Trauma will cause you to internalize shame. If they knew me, they wouldn't love me. Everything is worthless. Everything is crap. I am crap. It's all hopeless. But that's not your brain being a jerk. That's you and your brain needing to get together and recognize trauma makes you an enemy to yourself. But our brains are not evil and they're not out to get us. Trauma will make it seem like that. And that's your question of safety and danger. Trauma does create this sense of I'm not safe, but the miscommunication is I'm not safe with myself. I can't trust myself. I can't love myself. I
Mm.
can't be alone with myself. And that's just not true. It was unsafe and it was painful and it was terrible, but your brain is not the problem.
So true. Britt, in my line of work, whatever years I practiced as a therapist helping, especially, the survivors of narcissistic abuse and narcissistic parents, one of the biggest emotion I have observed and seen, with survivors of narcissistic abuse is shame primarily. And what I've observed, that they don't just carry the trauma, they carry this very weird kind of a self blame, deeply set and rooted inside of them. Now I would want to know, from your neuroscience perspective, how does shame physiologically reinforce stuckness? And what
Mm.
are the first signs that someone is starting to break free, from that kind of a loop?
So I don't think I told you that I'm working on a new book about shame right now. So I love that
Wow.
question so much. It'll be out in September of 27. So that
Wow.
I am
Okay.
all shame right now.
So
All things
excited.
shame. My poor therapist.
Wow.
I have the
Mhm.
right meds, so yay. And I am a survivor of narcissistic abuse. So I have a
Oh,
very deep
my. Mhm.
connection to this question. And so
Mhm.
narcissism is an interesting thing because it is, I think, the only human dilemma where the person who has it doesn't have the symptoms. If I have cancer, I am going to have the symptoms. If I have the flu, I can't give you my sore throat and my stuffy nose. But with narcissism, the way that that particular dilemma works is that whoever has the narcissism is able to transfer the symptoms to a partner or to a family member or to a loved one. So narcissism is a shame based challenge, but a narcissist isn't going to play with that. So their partner is going to feel the shame. The world is going to take the blame. And it's going to the symptoms of narcissism are going to show up in another person, which, if you think about it, is kind of bonkers. How is narcissism the only affliction where you can give someone else your symptoms, which is wild. I could go on for years about narcissism. But your question of how does shame contribute to stuckness? And so I really do believe with shame that we might have been thinking of in the clinical mental health world, we might be thinking about it maybe in an incomplete way, right? Yes, shame is bad. It is deadly. Of all the emotions, it's the one that I would wish to cross off and get rid of. I hate feeling shame more than anything else that you can possibly feel. And if we're willing to use it, shame can become a really powerful catalyst for change. If I'm willing to face my shame and I'm willing to work with it, if I'm feeling shame because I did something to you, I could use that shame to repair. If I'm feeling shame because you did something to me, I could use that shame to create boundaries or to step back and to find healing. If I'm experiencing shame because of society, I could use that to help other people. So shame is sort of like trauma, or addiction. Shame is not good. It can be useful. But if you don't know that, shame will show up and manifest in the body as a freeze state, as a shutdown state. The sciencey people would call that a dorsal vagal shutdown, meaning your
Yep.
brain is going, everything is bad, we're going to die, turn the system off and freeze. And that's how shame, in fact, is a form of stuckness.
Okay. True. Britt, your micro yes framework really resonates with me because I, used to tell my clients about this, micro errors, micro permission, whenever they are in recovery and coming out of that crappy household and that crappy relationship. Um, and I used to say that because I personally feel it's very difficult for people like us to make that giant leap, from here to there. It's very difficult. It doesn't happen, initially when you go no contact or when you leave. It really happens over a period of time. Um, but when I came across your, this understanding of micro yes that you teach, I mean, this entire framework, I would want to know, could you walk us through how these micro yeses work in the brain, if you can talk about, other aspects at play, and why they are more effective for long-term change than, massive overhauls?
Yeah, and I love microRSs because they're so easy and accessible. Big changes, brains don't like big changes. Brains like their patterns, brains like predictions, brains anytime you try to make a change, even if it's a good one, your brain's going to fight you on it. And again, it's not because your brain's a jerk, it's because brains are wired to stay in pattern. And so even
Wow.
if I'm trying to quit using drugs, my brain is not going to go, oh, great, drugs are bad for us, so let's quit. My brain is going to go, our pattern is do the drugs. If you're now saying stop doing the drugs, that is a huge change in what your brain, am used to. So, nope, not going to happen. Now, micro yeses are a solve for that problem. What a micro yes is not taking a baby step. It's not taking a small step. It's taking the most ridiculously small, like if there's something you want to do, like go work out after work or go no contact with a family member or whatever the thing is you want, figure out what a small step would be. Cut that step into 20 more pieces. That's a micro yes. And I'll give you an example. When I was in my addiction and I was finally ready to come out, I was smoking a lot of meth, and I had told a friend, like, this is what I'm up to. And I had been smoking for a few days, so I was not sane. I was very tweaky, as they say. And I'm like, what am I going to do? And I have to go to rehab, and I've lied to everybody, and I'm all these huge things. And she sort of listened, and then she stopped and said to me, Britt, when was the last time you've eaten anything? And that sort of stopped me in my tracks. And I was like, oh, yeah, food is a thing. Like, food is a thing that needs to happen right now. But in my state, I couldn't even, like, the idea of feeding myself was what's like, again, I've been up for days. I'm seeing things, I'm hearing things, I'm hallucinating. It's just not good. And so this woman talked me through going to my refrigerator, getting a yogurt, and eating that yogurt spoonful by spoonful for an hour. That's a micro yes. Micro yeses don't look like anything, but here's why they work. Because our brains are programmed to stick with the pattern, to stick with what we know, a micro yes is so small, it doesn't trip out your brain. Your brain's not going, oh no, she's doing something big. It's like she's eating a yogurt. Who cares? She's taking a spoon and putting it in the packet, like whatever. And so micro yeses allow you to maneuver under your brain's threat response system. And then they build, it's almost like building up a tolerance. It's like getting a vaccine. Like you get, oh, okay, that's a whole nother thing. But the idea, wherever you stand on the vaccine question, the idea is that if you build up a tolerance over time, suddenly you're not able to do bigger things. And so micro yeses will build on each other, and then you can do bigger things. My life didn't stay at the pace of one spoonful of yogurt at a time, but it was a spoonful of yogurt got me to a shower, and that got me to another call. That got me eventually
Wow.
help. So that's a micro yes.
Wow. Brett, there was a, stage and, point in life, I mean, in my life, where I was in therapy. I reached out to a psychiatrist for help, a therapist for help, because of my all that unprocessed trauma. I was just surviving. I didn't have ABC of psychology. I didn't know. It was very alien for me. I wanted some external help. And, I remember one of the conversations that I had with my psychiatrist was that, I desperately want to heal, but I really don't know how can I do it myself. And, now after, completing my studies and becoming a therapist and working for a while, I did come across the same thing where survivors of narcissistic abuse, they reach out to me and they desperately want to heal and become a new them. And they are, showing that, that they are really helpless. They just can't make themselves do it. And it's really heartbreaking. Earlier, I definitely experienced the same thing. But when I look at others going through the same crap, I mean, it's really heartbreaking and painful. I wish I had something that could wipe their memory and restart things. Those are the thought that comes into my mind. But of course, healing is not easy. I mean, it is painful. You have said, Britt, not about motivation. It's about safety. I would want you to unpack how the brain's threat system, has the ability to override our motivation, and how can we help ourselves, our loved ones or client, restore their sense of inner safety first. If you could help us unpack that.
Yeah, and when it comes to narcissistic, especially if there's narcissistic abuse happening, it's not safe. And so the expectation that I'm going to just build my life up and be really strong and awesome is just not true. Now, we talk about motivation like you either have it or you don't. That's not true. Our brain is always motivated. Our brain is going to be motivated in one of two directions. Our brain is either motivated to do what we want to do, go to the gym, put the boundary in place, don't answer the text, go no contact. Like, it could be motivated in the direction of what I want, or our brain is going to be motivated to protect and preserve and keep things exactly the way they are because of actual safety or what it perceives to be safety. I know I stayed in very, very abusive relationships for a long time, even though it was unsafe in the relationship, because I really believed that leaving would kill me. That, like, I couldn't leave because if I left, that my partner would be violent, or that if I left, I wouldn't be able to make it on my own. And so, as long as my brain is convinced that something terrible is about to happen, it's always going to be motivated towards safety. It's the same with addiction. Obviously addiction can kill you, but to a brain, it's, if we quit using, we're going to lose all of our friends and we're going to be publicly humiliated and we're going to have to face our shame, and this is going to be worse, so keep doing what we're doing. And so it's motivation waiting to feel like it is just not, it's just not a thing. And it's not a direct comparison, but when you're a survivor of narcissism, you may not realize it, but you've become an addict too, because the cycle of abuse becomes its own chemical cycle. And anytime you're exposed to a chemical cycle, your brain's going to get used to it. And so when you leave a narcissistic situation, you have to go through withdrawal very similarly as a drug addict. I didn't know that. Again, I'm not comparing me using drugs to someone being abused. I've been on both sides of it, but you don't know that your brain becomes addicted to its own stress hormones. Dr. Gabor Mate talks about that. And
Mm-hmm.
so micro yeses become even more important when you factor in how big of a chemical storm these narcissistic situations are for your brain. Like, we don't want to go for big things unless you're going to die. Obviously, if something is going to kill you immediately, we need to take big actions. But micro yeses might be, I don't know whether to stay or leave. Too big of a question. Today, it might be find a resource for yourself. A lot of people won't leave relationships because of finances. So then your micro yes can be related to financial independence or financial literacy or whatever. But find a micro yes is a lot easier than do the big, giant, scary, huge thing that's going to change everything.
True. And I would like to add something over here. In narcissistic relationship, I have seen, this phenomena of limerence at play a lot. The narcissist, your perpetrator, your abuser becomes your limerent object. And you are just chasing it. It's like, you are chasing a fantasy that never reaches fruition, if that makes sense. You just want it and you're just in that rat race and chasing. And I think that is, where all that chemical goof up happens on the inside. And that is what keeps us stuck. So I think, ideally, if you see in a healthy relationship, example, if I'm dating my husband, there is this limerence initially, then it graduates to love, then there is stability and grounding, and there is fruition. We end up in marriage and sex, and we move on in life. Right, we create something beautiful for ourselves, we start family. But when you are experiencing, I think Dorothy really explains it so well. Dorothy Tenov, who coined this term limerence, she explains that you are literally chasing. Now there are a lot of experts who are saying that limerence always ends up in sex, but I personally feel limerence can be at play in narcissistic relationship where there is no sex. I don't think sex is a common thing that I think you can be experiencing limerence towards your narcissistic family member, and definitely there is no sex over there. So I think that is where I feel there's a difference in understanding and perceiving this entire phenomena. But I think limerence is something that keeps us stuck. That hope that one day it's going to change, she's going to transform, he's going to transform, and that is what further screws our head, our brain chemistry, and our entirety. Now coming to another interesting thing, IFS. I mean, now this question is going to be, a little related to IFS. I love, how you in general bridge neuroscience with internal family system, and, the concept that we all have different parts inside of us. I have interviewed a couple of individuals who are IFS practitioner, Bob Falconer, then Melissa Sanford, and I shouldn't be saying this, but I've found that there was stage in their life. This just on a side note, they were also battling addiction. That's a very common thing, and then they got into IFS. So I don't know. I need to unpack that transition, how they transitioned, and they all are healed and flourishing and helping others. Now coming back to the question, um, for survivors of narcissistic families. Um, who often internalize voices of criticism and control, how can this IFS and your understanding and your experience, how can parts work help them build this a kind of an inner cooperation instead of that internal civil war and conflict? If you could help us understand that, Brit.
Yeah, and with internalized shame and internalized messages that we don't want, criticism, imposter syndrome, like on the light side, imposter syndrome, on the heavy side, I am worthless, and the whole spectrum. What internal family systems does is allow you to, I call this mind fusion. That's not an IFS term, that's just a me term. When all of those
Mhm.
parts sort of fuse together and all you hear is the one voice of criticism, the one voice of shame. So the my most recent book talks about how to defuse or unfuse. And I use IFS techniques, I use my own stuff. I like to mash it up. But the gist is we want to open up the room, so to speak, in our minds so we can see there's not just one in there. There are many voices. And then if you start to get to know these other parts of yourself, you'll realize, oh, this one voice that's yelling at me isn't the only one. It's not the loudest one, and I don't even need to listen to it. If you're in a busy city, let's say you're walking through, New York City, and someone on the street screams at you and gives you the finger and yells at you like, you suck. Okay. Well, I understand that I'm on a city street and that one person isn't necessarily my truth, and that I don't have to sit down and get to know that person, and I don't need to believe what that person says. I'm aware there's a lot going on, and that one person has their one opinion of me on that street on that day. But we're not aware that our minds are the same way. Our minds are very much a crowded city street, and there's lots of characters in there, from messages, from media, from family, from culture, and we don't have to listen to all of them. But if you think that that guy on the street yelling is the one voice of truth, you're going to feel pretty bad all the time. IFS helps you to sort of pan out and see the scene and how many players and characters are in there. And then we get to choose which people we want to talk, which parts of us we want to talk to or connect with.
True. Britt, I think, what I'm about to ask is, a very crucial question. So many survivors, including me in the past, mislabel themselves as lazy, when in truth, they are stuck in that freeze state. And, we see ourselves as lazy. I'm just being lazy. I was really lazy. I was wasting my time. Uh, Now, of course, I see things differently. Could you help us demystify the difference? What's happening, neurobiologically, when someone's in, that frozen state versus someone who's unmotivated? If you could precisely
Yeah.
educate us on the difference.
Lazy is a moral judgment. Lazy is not a biological reality. So when you're not doing the things that you know you want to be doing, that you know you could be doing, that you know you should be doing, laziness is not the reason why you're not doing them. And some people get very angry at me when I say that. And they're saying, you're just being soft and you're coddling people and telling them it's okay to do nothing. No, I'm not. I'm not saying it's okay to sit on your couch all day. I'm saying it's not because you're lazy that you're on the couch all day. Because if we want to solve the problem of not doing things, we have to frame the problem correctly. Laziness is about morality and about your your internal qualities and it's about will. It's not laziness. If you're laying on the couch, one of several things is true. One, you might be physically exhausted because you've spent a 15-hour shift working in a helping profession and you have 3 kids and aging parents and an abusive partner. So is it lazy that you're not going to the gym at 7 o'clock after that day? Not so much. I'm calling that's probably smart that you're not getting up off the couch. Okay, well, what about a 20-year-old who's sitting on the couch smoking pot all day and playing video games? Okay, great. Well, who's paying for the pot? And whose sofa is it? And who's paying for the TV that they're watching? I wouldn't say that they're being lazy. I would say someone's enabling them. And if someone's going to make their life easy, of course they're going to lay on the couch and do nothing. Like sometimes it's not laziness, it's that somebody is making our life easier than it needs to be. And so we have absolutely no incentive to go out and do anything. Brains are very much that if I don't have to change, why would I? Change is energetically expensive from a input output standpoint. It takes a lot of energy to change. So if someone's making it easy for me to not change, I'm not going to. And so, but that's not laziness. So I would argue, like the young adult on their parent's couch doing nothing, when the parent comes to me and says, my kid is lazy, I would say, actually, your kid is being really efficient with the resources that they're being given. Maybe we change that ratio
Wow.
by making it less easy for them.
Mm-hmm. True. Brit, growing up in a narcissistic family, I personally feel really rewires your brain. It really fries and cooks your brain. And the result is you are hyper vigilant. I'm all the time, my former self, all the time scanning for threats, rejection, criticism. Is some chaos at play? I was in that detective mode all the time. I would want to know, with your experience as a clinician and as a researcher, I would want to know what are some brain based, simple, easy ways survivors can gently start rewiring all of these old survival patterns
Mm.
into new, safer ones. I mean, newer, better version, which is safe and easy for them. What are your
I
thoughts?
love that you use the word gentle because it really is for survivors, especially
Yep.
of narcissism. You have to be gentle. You're not going to solve the problem by yelling at yourself or shaming yourself. And so, the very first thing I would encourage anyone to do is to validate whatever they're thinking. Now, here's the thing: validate doesn't mean agree, and it doesn't mean this is just how it is. But let's say I have the thought, oh my gosh, I'm such a terrible person because I spent 4 hours online stalking my partner, and I could be the detective agency you see in the movies in my ability to figure out who they're talking to and where they're going. Instead of, oh my God, what's wrong with me? Why did I do it again? I know I'm not supposed to be looking. I know I need to. Okay. Validating sounds like this. And here's the sentence that you can use: it makes sense that I feel blank because blank. It makes sense that I feel like being a stalker detective because this has been really hard on me. So you say to yourself, it makes sense that I feel this because this. And then, and here's the important add on: what are my choices right now? And of those, what's my micro yes? And that's how you get unstuck. You don't start with, why am I doing this? What's wrong with me? Why am I so? Mm-mm. You start with validate. It makes sense that I feel this because this. What are my choices? Of those, find a micro yes and do it. And then you repeat. And whether you're stuck with addiction, with narcissism, with a financial mess, whatever it is, those 3 things: validate, identify choices, do a micro yes, will get you on the road to unstuckness.
So true. Brit, for those listening who feel they have tried every goddamn thing, in their life and on this planet, and they still feel stuck and they still feel paralyzed, what is one of your best practical neuroscience backed step that they can take today to start shifting, from protection mode into, a mode of possibility?
Well, first, I would say it makes sense that you feel frustrated because you have done so much work and you put so much effort in. And that's the validation piece, right? Like, it makes sense that you're feeling like, I've tried everything on the planet when it's not working. Makes sense that you feel that way. And then I would say, what's the truth? The quiet, sticky, and again, this isn't about blame. It's just about, if you've tried everything and nothing is working, we're missing something here. So I would say, are you willing to get really honest about what's the piece that you're missing? I tried everything for years, but I didn't try very long, and I didn't try very consistently, and I didn't try very honestly. Like I tried lots of things, and it was, I'm going to do this year, and this year, and this month, and I'm going to try this that month. And I always found a reason why to quit something. I don't like my counselor. I don't like this program. I don't like my group. This is stupid. Da, 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 da. So then, okay, I validate you tried lots of things and nothing's working. What's the one truth, the yucky, icky, sticky truth that we need to kind of dust off and look at? And then are you willing? And that's where we start. Gently, with no
Wow.
shame, but that's where we start.
True. And before we end today's discussion, Britt, I have got something interesting to ask. And that is, I had been hearing, this since the time I remember things, that whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And I mean, I hate it. I just hate this. I find it really gaslighty. I mean, now, I mean, you have seen a lot, you have experienced a lot, you have written so many things, you have helped so many people, and you are in the process of helping and educating people. What are your thoughts on this statement? I mean, what does it mean at this point of time to you?
It's a great Kelly Clarkson song, and I really like the Kelly Clarkson song, "What Doesn't Kill You Makes You Stronger," because I love her. As far as a
Hmm.
clinical ideology, absolutely not. What doesn't kill you will kick the crap out of you and make you feel like a terrible person and cause you to have to spend inordinate amounts of money and time doing things that would have otherwise been put to better use. But what doesn't kill you, if you are willing to use the process of alchemy, will give you lots of opportunities to still have a good life in spite of. I am who I am not because of my trauma, it's in spite of my trauma. I would have found a way to become me without abuse. But like, if we don't have a choice about it, we might as well use it. I prefer that philosophy.
True. And Britt, I was actually, talking on these lines. I share my personal experience on my thread and Substack. And, I said that, even though it didn't kill me, but it just wreaked havoc. I'm just an effed up being, and my entire life is going to be repairing myself and working on myself on a daily basis. And then something interesting happened. These litany of these karmic teachers and soul contract experts, they landed up somehow on my, that post, and they started telling me horrific things. And one of the thing was, just take a random guess, Brit, what it could be. I mean, what is the worst thing that you can expect, from a stranger telling a survivor or victim? You know what they were telling me? They were literally telling me that you are, processing things in a wrong way. You were abuser in the past, and that's the reason in this life you are being abused. You chose your abusive parent. And I was like, wow, we have such people in 2025 on social media. And trust me, rather than any good, these folks can really hurt people like us and other people as well. What are your thoughts? I mean, did we choose, what's happening to us? Or, I mean,
Oh, I have, we don't have enough time to unpack all my many thoughts about someone telling you that. I don't know, because I wasn't in the great heavenly conference room in the pocket universe where apparently we all choose our life paths. Like, I don't know.
wow.
I know you don't say that to someone, like, because that's not helpful. And so here's sort of where I've landed on that, because I've had people say, I'm clearing my karma. I was an abuser. This is how I'm working. I should thank my abuser because they volunteered to be that person in my
Oh,
life, like all of it. Like, okay, sure, maybe, but like, number one, no, not your place to tell me to forgive, to embrace that I chose this or that I manifested it. No, 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 no. Here's what I go, where I go. I don't know what happened before I was born. Free consciousness is not my business. What my business is in this meat puppet that I call Brits that I walk around in. What are my choices? Am I aligned with how I want to live my life? Are my actions matching my values? Am I experiencing joy? And to the degree that I am able, if I can experience joy, can I become willing to participate in the process of ungunking myself of all the junk? Sure. And then we can let the pre-consciousness and what happens after we die, that I do trust that'll take care of itself, and I don't need to mess with what happened before I was here, and I don't need to worry about what happens when I'm no longer here. I'm going to focus on today, right now, presence, and let that stuff work itself out. But no, don't tell me that I brought this on myself.
Wow, beautiful. So thank you so much, Britt. It was such a wonderful conversation, and I'm looking forward to have you again for some other topic. And guys, please check out Britt's book. It's available on Amazon, and you can reach out to her website. I'm going to mention it in the description. Britt, thank you so much. It was so wonderful.
Thank you so much for having me on.